So welcome to our session today. As I mentioned, we're looking at bringing authentic First Peoples content into our K-3 classroom with a specific focus on literacy. And we will spend the next couple of hours digging into that. So we sent out our pre-workshop email to you on Wednesday morning. If you were here, you would have gotten that because you got the Zoom link, but the handouts were there as well as the resources we'll be sharing in this session today. So you can see we've divided them into categories: resources, videos and music, additional resources, and some publishing resources. So the songs that we're using for the timers and the countdowns, that playlist of music is available to you there if you were looking to share some Indigenous music in your classroom. And so this will stay up for you to reference and use after the workshop if you are looking for any of the resources that we share today. And the first thing that we wanted to look at is a foundational document and resource for building this workshop today is this one here with the image, the cover there on the right. So it's called In Our Own Words, Bringing Authentic First Peoples Content to the K-3 Classroom. And that was published by FNES, which is the First Nations Education Steering Committee of BC. So their provincial program, like POPEY is. And we're looking to their expertise and guidance on using culturally appropriate and meaningful First Peoples content, materials, and teaching methods. And then looking at ways we can incorporate local Indigenous content and authentic First Peoples text into our classrooms and our students' literacy learning experiences. So this guide, In Our Own Words, is linked out in the Padlet as well. And maybe Jenna, I can get you to drop the Padlet link into the chat box while I'm presenting this section. That would be great. Thank you.
I just did. I'm ahead of you.
Beautiful. You are. So the first thing that we wanted to share is this fabulous resource from the First Peoples Cultural Council. And so they have this online interactive map that we can use to view Indigenous language, the regions, artists, artwork, place names, and community landmarks. So you can hear the pronunciation of language names, greetings, places, and more. And all of the 34 languages Indigenous to what is now called BC are represented here. So you can see there's a visual of what those different places are and the place names, and the website is interactive. This is an interactive map looking at language and pronunciation. And we always like to start our workshops with a quote. And this one is from Lana Purcell's new book. So she's just written a book that was published recently. It's called Heartbeat of the Earth, a handbook on connecting children to nature through Indigenous teachings. So she says, traditionally, Indigenous children were exposed to a holistic experiential style of learning. We gave our children opportunities by doing. We see ourselves as part of nature and not a separate entity. Children learn from a young age that what we do to nature, we do to ourselves. Elders' wisdom reminds us that everything is related. All life is equal. Everything must be kept in balance, and all life requires respectful care. Our teaching supports the belief that all life is interconnected while keeping children at the center of their learning experience. So really powerful in its clarity and simplicity. And we thought it paired nicely with this quote from Chief Seattle. So Leona Price is a BC educator and author, and we'll share her book later. She had this quote that she shared at the Changing Possibilities for Young Learners session last week. So we have not woven the web of life, we are but one thread in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together, all things connect. Again, just powerful in its beauty and simplicity. And that ties in as well with this First Nations holistic lifelong learning model. I was really fortunate a couple of weeks ago to attend a national outdoor learning conference in Banff. And David and Krista presented a session on incorporating First Peoples principles and culture and teachings into their outdoor classroom in Toronto. And we just thought it was a really beautiful graphic and representation of those relationships and the interconnectedness and the respect. So I'll just leave this up for a moment and ask if you can share in the chat. What's something that you notice? What jumps out at you about or from this model? Maybe it's something that's a contrast to some other things from our ministry curriculum. And Jen, you can let me know if we see anything there. Anybody wants to share something? That would be lovely.
Sure. I think people are still typing, but I'm really noticing that collective well-being in the center there. That just spoke to me, and like it really, really connects to the following or the previous two quotes that you shared, and just love that idea, collective well-being. It's so much more than individual well-being. So we have people talking about family, natural world, interconnectedness. It's connected to earth, parents, the importance of community, nurturing. So other people, the collective well-being stood out versus individualism. Kind of like it takes a village to raise a child. There's strong roots. The visible may be less visible. Interesting. Thank you for that. And that sense of holistic well-being.
Yeah. One thing that jumped out at me when I first saw this too is the part sort of below the earth line there, the roots of the tree, the sources and domains of knowledge and how many there are. And that the natural world is a source and domain of knowledge for us. I really thought that was a powerful takeaway for me. So yeah, thank you everyone for sharing your connections. BCTF has a few of these posters available in different formats and color schemes with different images in that, but they all contain these Aboriginal ways of knowing and being. So you can request these posters for your classroom. Some are more appropriate to primary and elementary, some more to secondary rather. But these are some of the practices, beliefs, and I guess principles and framework, the approach to learning. And again, it builds on those two quotes that we shared from Lana and Chief Seattle, and also from that beautiful image of both the interconnectedness and respecting generational expertise and wisdom from elders, but also that learning takes time, but also the connections to land and spirit. So here, we've just retyped those out on this slide. These are the same Aboriginal ways of knowing and being that are on the poster. It might be a little easier to read here. And this next activity, we're inviting you to reflect on a personal connection or learning that you have experienced yourself in your lifetime, whether when you were young going up through school or as an adult learner, just a citizen of the earth. What's one way that you've had a powerful, meaningful, memorable learning experience? And if you can share that in the chat box. So it may be about being connected to land, maybe connected to your ancestors or elders, story, relationship, lived experience, any of these. So generally what I usually share here is the story about learning to make apple pies from my grandmother, and that the memory of our relationship and learning from my elder and her having expertise and wisdom that she would teach me and my sister. And we were sort of apprenticing under her and learning to do that and making pies as gifts to give away to our friends. And it was a really memorable day for all of those reasons. But it was maybe the first time I had had my grandmother teach me how to do something explicitly and be my guide and my teacher. And I feel like that showed me a different side of her and gave me a new appreciation as a younger person for all of the wisdom and knowledge that she held. So that's just my example as a model or an example of something that you might have a connection to. We'll give you about a minute and a half with some quiet music playing. You can reflect and share in the chat box. to one of these Aboriginal ways of knowing and being that you may have some personal experience with. Yeah, thank you. So much about it being experiential, but also about how it's often so deeply tied to our relationship. And so thinking about this, the educator, the guide, the coach, the facilitator for our students' learning journeys, can we be mindful of nurturing those relationships with our students so that they feel safe and they feel the impact and the power of our teaching and our support as we move through our year with them, maybe more sometimes. So thank you for sharing all of that. As always, we like to start with the why. And so why are we doing the things that we're doing, our instructional choices around teaching and text, and what resources we're sharing with our students and how we nurture and guide and support them. So looking at why it's important to use authentic resources, I think we probably all understand that it is important to use authentic resources, and we'll just share these points from Finesse. So if we're increasing our use of authentic First Peoples resources, it's a benefit to all of our students. So our Indigenous students will see themselves, their families, their cultures, and their experience represented as being valued and respected. And our non-Indigenous students will gain a better understanding of and appreciation for the significance of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples and cultures within the historical and contemporary fabric of this province. So if we think about what we deem important and valuable shows up in our classroom. And so what we draw attention to, the stories, the voices, the culture, the people that we draw attention to and take up airtime talking about and focusing on is an indicator to everyone of what we value. And so are we representing all of our students and all of their voices and all of their cultures and experiences? And finding Indigenous texts and resources is a really great entry point for being able to do that. Here's a screenshot of another resource by Finesse called Authentic First Peoples Resources. So if you are looking for resources to use, this is a K-8 guide, but there are lots of things for primary. And it's cross-curricular. So it's not just about literacy, but there's a lot of really wonderful mentor texts. So student resources, but also teaching resources for us as well. If you are wondering where you can start to bring in more Indigenous texts, we would recommend that as a really wonderful starting place.
And Lisa, I'll just jump in for a second. I was just on that site yesterday or the day before, and there you can search. There's a searchable aspect of it. So if you want to look at a specific target grade level, or you're looking for read aloud and you teach grade 2, then you could be looking at maybe a grade 4 level text for text complexity if you're doing the reading. So yeah, just wanted to let you know that it's easy peasy to use.
Thank you. That's great detail. Thank you. So one of those beautiful Indigenous texts and authors, Monique Grace Smith, we will share this very short, beautiful story with her, and inviting you to just notice the simplicity of the story, but the beauty of the illustrations, and thinking about some of our students who maybe don't always see themselves reflected in the stories and the read alouds we share, and the importance and power of being able to identify with the illustrations and characters in a story. So a lovely invitation to consider all the ways that we can hold each other up in our classrooms and our communities. So mentor text as mirrors, windows, and sliding doors is a concept that was coined or created by Rudine Sims Bishop. So she's from Ohio State University. And this is just a very short video of her explaining what she means by these terms. And our question to you is just to think about, can all of our students see themselves in the stories that we choose to share and tell in our classrooms? All right. So our next section here, what we're going to do is guide you through a close look at the First Peoples principles of learning and how that maps and correlates and connects to BC's early learning framework. So the early learning framework was updated in the last few years. very strongly built upon First People's principles of learning. And we wanted to draw your attention to that and spend a few minutes focusing on that. So what we're going to do is we'll show them to you in full text on the next slide. So you'll see both side by side, the First People's principles of learning on the left and the early learning framework principles on the right. So we'll give you 3 minutes with a quiet music timer. And what we'll ask you to do, if you've got the print handout, you've got it written down, you can highlight or circle it. If you don't, you can just jot some keywords down. So what we're doing is comparing the two lists and the keywords, and we invite you to reflect on how these principles align with each other and also how they currently guide your practice. So there's probably a lot of your practice reflected in these principles from both documents. And then the next step for that is a stretch goal or a takeaway or something new to try. So are there one or two First People's principles that could be new additions to your practice, your instruction, or your routines that you would like to draw more attention to or have it come more into your day-to-day rhythms of your classroom and your school community? And as the music ends, as we've been doing, we'll ask if you're comfortable sharing a takeaway, a connection, or an opportunity in the chat box with us. So here we go. First People's Principles of Learning here on the left. And then the Early Learning Framework Principles on the right. So you've got a nice long stretch of time here. It's like funny, 3 minutes seems like a long time in a workshop. So we'll ask for you to read, compare, reflect, and if you can, to identify a stretch goal and or a takeaway. Thank you so much.
Okay, so really a lot of you mentioned in the chat box just now about the connection to learning about land and place and that importance put on learning about the land that we are on. So let's take a look at the 5 concepts of place that have been identified as being really important. So place is multidimensional. We're talking about place as more than a geographical space. We're talking about what place holds in terms of history, culture, emotions. So it cannot be divided into parts, but we're talking about lots of different levels of place when we're talking about the importance of the territory that we're on, the land that we are on. Place is a relationship. Now, many of you mentioned this in the chat box just now. The relationship encompasses both human relationships, which we learned a lot about when we were asking you about your special people that hold you to the place that you're in, and also between people and the land. And we're going to get into that a little bit more shortly here, but just that importance of relationship. Place is local. So there's commonalities, but really we know across BC, we know across the land that we now call Canada, there's tons of uniqueness within our local communities. And that is reflected through the stories that are connected to place. So very, very important to consider that. And that place is experiential. The experiences that happen through place, on place, give the land its meaning. And place is land-based. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the land is interconnected and essential to all aspects of culture. And I hope you see that as a thread through our time this afternoon. But that importance of locating ourselves in place, thinking about our connection to place and the land and what we can learn from the place that we're on. So in a nutshell, we are thinking about place as multidimensional, relationship, local, experiential, and land-based. So as we consider those important aspects of place, I'd like you to sit back and relax and enjoy a story called Island in the Salish Sea. And what I'd love for you to consider and pop into the chat box as it comes up is, what are some of the important places to the main character, the little girl, and why do you think that they're important to her? So enjoy this lovely story, and let's connect on those importance of place. So to continue on with that idea that learning is connected to land, culture, and spirit, I'm going to have you write a list of important places that you live in the area. Important places in the area you live. Sorry about that. And why they're important to you. And just to share a few things that are important to me in my area. And then after, I'll tell you why they're important. Okay, I have a fun way to share a little bit more about these photos with you and why they're important. But first, I'm going to give you 90 seconds to write a list of important places in the area you live. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat box. I'm seeing a big trend of outdoor places. And why not when we live in the most beautiful province in the world? So I'm going to share with you something that you might want to do with your students. And this is a little map of my most important places that I just shared with you through photographs. Now I'm going to explain why they're important. Okay, here I am at my favorite place, Shuswap Lake, my home, my place. There's my house on the lake with the flowers in the front. Flowers were a very important place for me because they bring me so much joy, and I love watching the bees on the lavender. And there's my boat that I get to go out and experience the beauty of Shuswap Lake on my boat. Over here, I have one of my favorite places is my sauna and outdoor shower, which is just the place where I get to unwind and love being out in nature and having a wonderful sauna and then jumping in my lake. Oh, up to Sun Peaks, which is a local ski hill. Love to go downhill skiing, don't get to do it enough, but I absolutely love getting outdoors and experiencing that ski hill. Another favorite place is over here on Skamana Lake. We have a beautiful cross-country ski trail that goes all the way around the lake and it's just gorgeous. And then finally over here, we have the Adams River. And this is a very important place for me because it is my parents' favorite place to visit when they come to stay with me. So we always make time to go over to Adams River and do that lovely walk along the river. Excellent. Thank you so much. So you can see it's kind of a fun way to share working on students' oral development and kind of storytelling about their favorite places, but less risk taking if it's done in some way like this. And yeah, someone in the chat mentioned that this could be done under a doc cam. Absolutely. If you have those popsicle stick faces in whatever way, if there are photos or students who draw their faces, I use them all year round when I was in the classroom, because you could do so many different activities with them. So just a nice way to bring in students into the storytelling, almost like a puppet. Okay, so I am going to have you have a little takeaway from this and draw a map of your most important places that you mentioned in the chat box. So I'll give you, I think it's about 2.5 minutes here. So take some time. Obviously, you're just jotting down really basic ideas. You can see from my beautiful drawing that it's not artwork, it's just quick sketch. And then, you have a takeaway that you can share with your students on Monday if you want, or Tuesday. Monday, we're all going to be enjoying the sunshine still, hopefully. And how wonderful for your students to get an idea of your most important places and how you're connecting to your local area, and invite them to do the same. So hopefully you have a piece of paper close by. You can do some sketching. I'm going to play some wonderful music and we will reconvene in a moment. Continuing to think about the importance of land and place and local. It's a small shift in our thinking, but I think we grew up thinking about what we can learn about trees and plants and
It's
animals
long.
and water.
Wait, I need a plug.
But changing that a little bit to then think not what I can learn about, but what I can learn from. What can I learn from trees, plants, animals, land, and water? It's a little shift, but it's a powerful step as we consider the deeper connection and respect that we have for all living entities. So just thinking that shift through and considering the place that we're in, the area that we're in, the land, what can we learn from the area that we're in? So a wonderful book. We don't have time to listen to a read aloud of this one today, but I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what it's about because it leads in really nicely into our next activity. So A Day with Yaya, written by Nicola I. Campbell. She's out of the Nicola Valley, and the pictures are beautiful by Julie Flett. And this is a lovely story about a grandmother and family that go out gathering plants, edible plants and mushrooms. And along the way, the grandmother Yaya is introducing different words to the children that she's with, and they're practicing them and they're practicing pronouncing words. And she talks about the importance of language and connects that to place as well. So really special time for the family to be together through these gathering days. And there's so much intergenerational learning that happens, not only with the plants and mushrooms that they are discussing and finding out more information about, but with the language. So very lovely book if you wanted to have a great book recommendation. I'm going to move on because of the time. But thinking about what we can learn from plants and trees in our environment, there's these lovely cards that Lisa found that are actually free downloads. If you go to the link that is on the Padlet and here at the bottom of the screen here. And so Trees of BC in different categories, so needles and scaled leaves, and then broadleaves. So you can really dig into some important learning with your students around local trees in the different areas that we live in. Oh, thanks. Lisa just put the link to the Padlet in there if you wanted to check out this resource. So we can really support a close observation of trees and what we can learn from them through looking at their characteristics. And I learned so much just in the last couple of days by looking at these wonderful cards that Lisa found that really focus on cone shapes or leaf groupings. Like, what can we learn about how trees and leaves are constructed and designed, and what's their purpose? What is, some ways that we can learn about life cycles and things like that from a close observation of trees. So there's also another one that talks about even looking closely at leaf characteristics like the position and the edge. I didn't know that was a toothed edge leaf. That's so interesting. The shape. A lot of us might recognize like maple, but not necessarily some of the other ones. So how lovely to have this language that we're learning about to further investigate what we can learn about trees. There's also, just one sec. There's also some cards that are available through Strong Nations. They're Pacific Northwest Plant Knowledge cards, and they are lovely because they have the picture on one side that our students at the very early levels, our kindergarten students, can read the pictures to use these cards effectively. And then we can provide more information as teachers, that the information is on the back, describing more about the Devil's Club and more of a description and how it can be used, in different ways. So lovely way to introduce our students to different things in our area. I was lucky enough to be working in a school district on the island, and it was interesting because every Tuesday was Forest Tuesday, and there was the kindergarten group all went out and went for a walk every Tuesday afternoon, rain or shine. They just knew that Tuesday afternoon was Forest Tuesday, and the teacher had these cards, and she had picked out what was common in the area that they usually went for a walk in and laminated them, because often it was raining, and she just had them on a little ring. So she didn't have all of the cards. There's quite a few of them, but she just picked out what might be seen in the area, and she had them with her. And every time that they went out, if a student found something, they would look it up together and discuss. So different ways to look at trees on those cards too. And this is what we're going to do now. So we're going to see what plants and trees are in the area right outside of our doors right now. So we're giving you an extra long break. We'll give you the whole 15 minutes. I know we're pushing time there, but full 15 minutes to take a quick look outside if you can and find a plant or a tree and take a photo of it. Now there's an app that might help, PlantNet. And Lisa, you said that this is a free app, right? I haven't checked it out yet. Okay. And then, so you might want to do some identifying with that app, or maybe you know exactly what you're looking at. And then once we come back together after the break, see if you could tell us a little bit about what you found about your tree plant. It might be a name, it might be a characteristic. Things you might notice are the shape of the leaves or flowers, or colors, or how tall it is. So we'll just share a couple of details when we come back together after the break. And hopefully you have some fun with that. And we will return in 15 minutes. So that will put us at 1:45 Pacific time.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome back. We hope you had a good break and time to get outside and explore a little bit of your immediate local surroundings. And maybe this activity helped you to slow down and pay more close and careful attention to a plant or tree that you maybe have walked by or been near many, many, many times. So what we're going to do now is we'll give you about 1.5 minutes. So you're focusing on the kind of plant or tree that you found. Maybe you took a picture of it. Maybe you know what it is. Maybe if this was a real activity in your classroom, you would need to do some research and investigating and exploring to track down what kind of plant or tree that it is. But we'll invite you to jot some notes in the next 1.5 minutes and think about what you can share in the chat box as the music ends. So for example, here are those categories of information again, if we're looking at classifying what we've seen. So either the type or shape of leaves or flowers it might have, a description of the bark or the trunk or the stem, color and other characteristics visually, how it looks. Does it have any berries or flowers or pine cones? How tall is it? And anything else you might have known or found out about it. So here's an example for you. This is a Douglas fir. And so if I had gone out on my break and seen a Douglas fir, I might note that it has flat green needles. The bark is reddish brown with some deep grooves. And this one that I saw, I could imagine it was 80 meters tall. So we'll give you about 1.5 minutes to jot some notes and then share either some features of your plant or tree. Feel free to do that. Another thing you could possibly do is just share what the experience was like for you to go outside with the intention and the assignment of looking for and finding, and then really paying close attention to noticing and observing a plant or tree in your immediate local environment. Well, thank you for engaging with that and sharing what you have in the chat box. We really appreciate that. And it's so heartwarming to see these connections and the language and the conversation, some of the vocabulary around plants and trees, and appreciation seems quite consistent for how beautiful it all is. So our questions to you with this type of an activity, if this was something, a routine that you started to bring into your classroom with your students, just thinking about how you could engage your students with this type of activity and what sort of resources like these, the plant cards or the free tree cards, that you could provide to your students as a learning support and a starting off point for their learning journey, or an inquiry project. So what inquiry project could it inspire? And then echoing back to what Jen talked about a little bit earlier before the break, the question being the bigger overarching question, what can we learn from these plants and trees? And as people have talked about how they change and adapt from season to season, and just keep coming back every spring to grow new leaves or shoots or flowers and bloom again and become lush and full and beautiful through the summer, that cycle of life, and their adaptability and their resilience, and how they are matched to fit and compatible with the environment that they're in. So for all of us joining and gathering from around all the corners of this geographic region, we all have very different plants and trees depending on the climate and the conditions of where we are in these very different places. So lots to explore there with our students. It's a really nice tie to literally ground ourselves and our students and our learning in the living beings that we share our local community with. So thank you. And when we look at the importance of First Peoples stories, we're shifting now into a stretch where we will share some example Indigenous mentor text with you as suggestions or possibilities for you to consider. Of course, you may have texts already at your school and in your classroom. But in First Peoples cultures and Indigenous learning, story is a main method of teaching, and that powerful combination of story and experience, used as a strategy, and passing on learning from generation to generation. So, and also stories enable holistic learning. So looking at how values, concepts, protocol, practice, and facts are blended and stirred up together, combined into narratives. And another aspect from First Peoples principles of learning and the Aboriginal ways of knowing and being that we're seeing consistently through this, which maybe isn't always seen so much in other cultures or our current Western colonial culture, is a really important part of story and learning, especially if we're doing oral storytelling. What it demands of the listener are the skills of listening and thinking. So communication isn't just about who's telling the story or who's talking, but it's about the receiver and the learner being an active listener and engaging and thinking in critical and creative ways about the place and the content that they're learning as well. So, and as we know, there are very many First Peoples groups and worldviews around this region of the world. Some very common elements among their worldviews, though, which we've seen and have touched on through our workshop this afternoon. Obviously, really clearly connecting with the land and environment and nature and place. the spirituality of place as being a part of the wisdom that we can draw from the earth. And then who holds the knowledge, what knowledge is valued. Again, thinking about those mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors of what we choose to focus on and what we draw our students' attention to, who is seen and who is reflected in the stories and the conversations that we're having in our classroom. So that respect and the role of elders and knowledge keepers, relationship, and that importance of oral tradition. So we're going to show a short video, and our question to you as you watch it to think about which of these elements of First People's stories and their worldviews are you seeing reflected in this video? So what are some of the things that jumped out at you there? I think for me, it's that intergenerational, the passing down the knowledge, but also how deeply and strongly the knowledge and learning and living is tied to the land and the water, and the tremendous respect that is shown for the natural environment, the land and the water and the resources. So anybody else, feel free to share. Thanks, Jen. So focusing in and continuing with the notions of stories and storytelling and stories as a key critical part of learning. We'll share here, we're going to do one activity and give you a quick overview of a couple of these books. So we're going to look at Stand Like a Cedar, which is another book by Nicola Campbell and illustrated by Carrie Lynn Victor. And then we will look at the bilingual This Is How I Know by Brittany Luby, and then We All Play by Julie Flett. So the illustrations are really beautiful, powerful, and the stories, we invite you to see the common themes through the stories. So before I share a little bit of Stand Like a Cedar with you, we won't read the whole book just due to our time constraints of being just with 2 hours here. But what I wanted to start with was something that we call a word splash. And so this is a tool that we can use with our students in previewing content to pique their interest and get them thinking and connecting to the text, making some predictions based on their prior knowledge and what they know, their lived experience, as well as some familiar terms and maybe some not so familiar terms. So what I did was I went through the book, Stand Like a Cedar, and I pulled out some words and phrases from the book. Some are familiar, simple ones, life cycle, paddling, but lots of phrases and some that they might not know. So our young students might not know what nourish means or what a caravan is or ancestors. But what I'll do is I'll give you I don't have a timer here, but if you can look at these and make some connections and predictions of what you think this story, Stand Like a Cedar, will be about. Yeah, so Jen has said some sort of journey. Sophia, growing your roots strong through your family, endurance, connecting to the land through nature. Thank you to people who are sharing your predictions. So you can see how this is a nice tool to engage and pique interest for our students before we even pull out the book and show them the cover, let alone reading into the story. So it opens up some really nice opportunities for pausing through the read aloud and discussing some of the language. Oh, that was on the word splash. This is the page that has a great caravan of family. Let's talk about this. So again, coming at our Indigenous mentor text with some intentionality and seeing if we can't also slow down our rhythms and our learning, just like we did when we went outside and looked at those plants and trees, really slow down to notice what's happening in the story and paying attention to the language and the illustrations. So here we go. And this is from the middle of the book. A noisy clan of dusty, happy children, a great caravan of family journeyed from valley bottom to mountain top. We listened as our elders shared a song about our ancestors when they traveled by horse and wagon, and before that, by travois and on moccasin-covered foot, in search of traditional foods to nourish our families. We are grateful for the land that takes care of us. We went fishing at our great river. From the mountains, our family went straight to the river one beautiful day in late summer. What did you eat? 5 kinds of salmon came to visit us. They shared a story of when our great river was clean. We could walk on the backs of 1,000,000 spawning salmon. Our nets were always full and our children never hungry. Today we went to the lodge. We went to the longhouse. We went to the mountain. We went to the land. We went to the water. We sat with our elders and prayed. We sang and danced in honor and gratitude of our loved ones. This song is our promise to protect, honor, and respect our sacred earth, the water that nourishes us, the 4-legged, the winged ones, the ones that walk and crawl. We are Indigenous. We love to run, paddle our canoes, dance, and play. When we need to remember our promises, we stand like cedar trees, hands raised to the sky. We are grateful for all living things. So this book is lovely. It has a glossary of terms on the back. So in both languages, it's got the Indigenous language, the English, and then also pronunciation guide. And you can see there's a QR code to get additional resources to support this text. So coming back to our word splash, we could revisit this if we were at class having a conversation with our interactive read aloud all together on the carpet and talk about where we saw these phrases and words come up in the story and were our ideas about traditions of the community, reconnecting with family, sharing traditions, salmon fishing, elders passing on history to children, a nature journey. Yeah, you all made really accurate, spot-on predictions of what would be involved in this story. So this word splash is a tool you can use to preview any kind of text you're doing, even nonfiction, and then to revisit. And it could be something that I might encourage my students to do, depending on the age and grade, to have students create their own word splash if they've read a book and they want to share it or preview it to someone else, to a classmate. So this is how I know. We'll just go through a few pictures here. And you can see it's got the 2 languages. How do I know summer is here? When Loon opens her red eyes to call across the water, and green Luna moth hides among birch leaves. And then we all play really is geared to more younger students, even preschool before pre-K. But beautiful illustrations you see here. Animals hide and hop and sniff and sneak and peek and peep. We play too. Again, making that strong connection between humans and other living beings that we share our communities with. So reflection here, thinking about books like these. So these are examples and samples for you of some really beautiful Indigenous mentor texts, beautiful illustrations and stories that reinforce and support and share those notions of Aboriginal ways of knowing and being, First Peoples principles of language, and everything that we've been talking about through the session this afternoon. So these are examples. Of course, there are other books. There's a growing number of Indigenous authors publishing books. So the books available to us for use in our primary classrooms are growing all the time. And thinking about the concepts, questions, the connections, and how these could prompt further learning or inquiry journeys for topics and themes with our students. So any connections you've got, feel free to enter that into the chat box.
Excellent. Okay, so we are going to take a look at some other ways that we can continue to connect to place, land, and be intentional with our focus of how we can learn from the land around us. So a really great book that I would recommend is called The Walking Curriculum and Evoking Wonder and Developing a Sense of Place, K-12 by Judson. And the simple act of walking can emphasize the importance of place. I'm sure if I polled you right now, everyone has their favorite walking place. And that's so interesting because it's such a important part of what we do on a daily basis and what we notice and what we see. There's walks that we probably go to unwind and enjoy the environment, that are slower paced, that make us connect to nature. There might be walks that are more intentional, like we're trying to get steps in, and but with thinking about how to introduce or invite our students into different kinds of walks to really be intentional and notice that the nature around us is not passive, but there for us to learn from and grow with and notice. We can do some very specific kind of walking to make those really intentional connections for our students. So the motion walk, using as many senses as possible. What is moving around you and what is on the move? So noticing, rather again, than looking at nature as passive, but really noticing what is moving, what can this tell us about this area and what can we learn from it? Someone earlier in the chat box mentioned the power of looking closely at a tree and noticing all the critters that were climbing all over it, and noticing that because it was something that perhaps that person didn't take the time to notice in that much depth before. So the motion walk can really be important for that kind of noticing. The line walk, find a human-made line so that we're determining between human-made, animal-made, how are we impacting where we are walking? So where does it lead? And then find a natural line. And this is what we can learn about animals. Often animals have better walk lines than humans do, right? Because they're very specific about where they walk and how they walk. Okay, and then we can have our students come back to the classroom, draw a map of the walk, and really notice the important parts of humans and animals in nature. The history walk is a really important one. What evidence can you find on your walk of something that happened here before this moment? So when we talk about the importance of place and we talk about the importance of this place has been here for a long time, what can we learn from place? Who has been here in this place in the past? What can we learn about that? And just put on our detective hats and really notice what we can about the history of our place. Another way that we can be very intentional with observing nature around us and noticing what we can learn from it is using sit spots. So this is becoming more and more popular in our BC schools to have a spot that's self-selected by our students that they can return to many, many times. This allows them to have their own space, their own spot that's different from the spot that our neighbors have. We have a different perspective. We have different things in our spot area. So it's very unique and local, and noticing what we can learn from our sit spot and the areas around us. So it really promotes that careful observation, reflection. So we can notice different things about seasonal change, about the little critters in our environment, learn from about life cycles. We can do a lot of things with sit spots. We can also use them as wonderful ways to develop story. So stories can be factual or imaginary. They can be a description of what we see, but they can also be some imaginary fun. So maybe that spider is a really good drummer, and what can I learn about that spider and tell a story about that? We could even think about imagining what the plants or animals are thinking or feeling. How wonderful to get to put ourselves into the place of plants and animals to really notice that reciprocal relationship. And of course, as I mentioned before, those repeated visits are very wonderful for us to see change and see how plants and animals are impacted over time. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple of different photographs, and then I will show you all 4 of them together and have you take just a quick moment to think about a virtual sit spot and which photograph you're really connecting to, and what you would, what you would connect to, I guess. So some lovely different photos here. Oh goodness. Beautiful. Okay, so choose one photo, and what do you notice, wonder, and imagine in that place? Just write a couple of sentences about your idea in the chat box, and then we'll come back together. I'll give you only 90 seconds, so you'll have to write kind of fast, but enjoy this time to just zone in on one of those photos. And what do you notice, wonder, and imagine? Wow, such powerful connections and wonderings and deep thinking that you're thinking about just a photograph. So you can see how useful that can be when we're working with our students to bring about that slowing down, noticing, wondering. So we can do that virtually. We can do that in our sit spots, and just have that time to connect to place. Hey, so there's also cross-curricular classroom units available from Finesc. So it's linked out here, and you can check those out. They go all the way from kindergarten to grade 3. They're very, very not elaborate. That's not what I was going to say. They give you tons of different prompts and resources and ideas and assessment. And throughout the units, they're always coming back to the idea that, these are generalized lesson plans for BC students, but make them local, make them your own, connect to your place where you are, so that it is more relevant for your students. But wonderful ideas here. I would definitely check those out. We also, at our POPEY website, we have a unit plan that is connecting to our animal neighbors. So it's based on the Finesc lesson plan, and we have it linked out on our website there. If you want to check that out, there's lots of things to check out there.
And that's in a Padlet as well.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Okay, so we're going to end most of the workshop with this lovely book that we really wanted to introduce you to and invite you to enjoy as much as we have. Now, this is Be a Good Ancestors, written by Leona Prince, and Lisa talked about that author a little bit earlier. She is in the school district in Chaco Lakes. She is the principal for Indigenous education, and this book is just absolutely beautiful. So just enjoy the language, enjoy the message, and enjoy the amazing artwork done by Carla Joseph. So here's a little bit more information about some of the sources that we talked about today, if you wanted to take a look at anything specific. And we'll just ask you to consider all of the different things that we did today, the research, and activities that we looked at in this list here, and what is really connecting to you, or what are you connecting with? So what's one thing that you can commit to try in your classroom or role? So super important when we think about that reflection piece on our learning, and also putting things into practice, trying things out, taking some risks. And then also it's really nice for Lisa and I to see what you're connecting to. So I will give you 1 minute. If you could put your ideas in the chat.